There's a short block on the east side of Trumbull Street in Hartford, Connecticut, between Pratt Street and Church Street, which is today occupied by two large buildings. At the corner of Pratt is the 8th-floor office and retail building at 242 Trumbull Street, and at the corner of Church is the 29-story office tower at 280 Trumbull Street. A little over a century ago, this block was very different. There was a row of buildings here, the tallest of which was just 5 stories. A number of historic businesses once existed here, operated by some notable Hartford personalities. A lot of history took place here long before the modern structures of today rose up in the 1980s. Hi, this is History with me, Dan Sterner. Please remember to hit the subscribe and like buttons as we explore the forgotten history of this fascinating block. This photograph is a view northwards up Trumbull Street in the aftermath of the Great Blizzard of 1888. It shows some of the buildings on the block of Trumbull north of Pratt Street. In the middle of the block were 2 commercial buildings, one of which was a 3-story structure with a distinctive roofline. It had 2 corner turrets flanking a central triangular gable. North of these, there were 2 old houses, which remind us that this part of Trumbull Street was still primarily a residential neighborhood at that time. Right at the southeast corner of Trumbull and Pratt stood a house with a lot of history. Built in 1798, this grand 3-story Federal-style residence had a very unusual layout. Its front door was actually at the back of the house, on the east side that faced towards Main Street. This 1897 illustration shows the house from the Church Street side, by which time an L had been built along the east side. There was once an elaborately decorated 2-story entrance portico on this side, from which the mansion's owners had a view east towards Main Street across several hundred feet of grass and gardens that had once been considered one of the attractions of the city. Eventually, as shown in this section from the 1877 bird's eye view of Hartford, this long block of Church Street behind the house was filled in with buildings, all the way east to Christ Church at the corner of Main and Church Streets. As befitting such an imposing residence, this house was home to some of Hartford's most prominent citizens. In the early 19th century, it was bought by lawyer Thomas Scott Williams, who served several terms in the State House of Representatives in the 1810s and 20s, and in the U.S. House from 1817 to 1819. A son-in-law of the famed Oliver Ellsworth, Williams was Chief Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court from 1834 to 1847, but by that time the house had a new owner. When the young lawyer Isaac Toucey, who was originally from Newtown, Connecticut, arrived in Hartford in about 1818, he so greatly admired the house that he declared to a friend that he wanted to buy it as soon as he got enough money. He was eventually able to achieve his goal, purchasing the home in 1824. He later added the L on the east side that I mentioned earlier. Toucey, who eventually moved to another house on Main Street, had an extensive political career, serving terms as a representative and a senator in both the Connecticut Assembly and the United States Congress. He was also a governor of Connecticut, U.S. Attorney General under President Polk, and Secretary of the Navy under President Buchanan. Toucey's former home at the corner of Trumbull and Church Streets was torn down in 1897 to be replaced by the Walder Building, erected by Aaron Walder. Designed by architect Brooks M. Lincoln, this was a 5-story apartment block with retail on the ground floor. In the early 20th century, the building's prominent corner storefront was occupied by Nelson's Drug Store. By 1920, there had been a number of changes on the block, and more changes would soon follow. In that year, there were 5 structures between the Walder Building and Pratt Street. Just south of the Walder was a 5-story apartment, office, and retail building also erected around 1898. At the time of this 1920 photograph, its ground floor was occupied by the county market, which had just been opened by J.J. Burns and Larry Taureau. Within 4 years, however, it was under new ownership and was called the Trumbull Market. By 1932, the Empire Delicatessen was located here. But going back to 1906, in that year, Edward Mahl moved his plumbing business from 1204 Main Street to 270 Trumbull Street, the store space in the south half of the building's ground floor. Mahl, shown here with his employees inside his Trumbull Street store in 1910, was originally from Norwich, Connecticut, and came to Hartford as a child with his mother and brothers around 1870. Engaged in the plumbing business until his death in 1919, Mahl and his 6 brothers were among the city's leading citizens. Described as one of the most prominent masons in Connecticut, Edward Mahl was also active in the 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard and the Putnam Phalanx. He served on Hartford City Council, Board of Aldermen, and Police Commission, and was president of the city's Board of Health. Returning to the 1920 view along Trumbull Street, just to the south was the building with the distinctive roofline that I mentioned earlier. South of that was a row of 3-story buildings that would all be replaced by a new structure in 1925-6. The first of these buildings was a 3-story structure with a distinctive gable-fronted entry portico on the ground floor. Further south, at the corner of Pratt Street, was an older 4.5-story gable-roofed building erected in the early 19th century. For years it served as a hotel under different names such as the Pratt Street House and the Clifton Hotel. Just north of it was a 2-story retail store building erected very quickly in 1917 by Moses Fox in the wake of a devastating fire that had destroyed his Main Street department store, G. Fox & Company. Intended to serve as a temporary store until the new G. Fox building was completed, this structure had an L shape, occupying areas to the north and east of the old hotel building. This G. Fox building had identical facades facing Trumbull Street and Pratt Street. After the Pratt Street section suffered fire damage in 1925, Fox replaced all of the structures in the vicinity of this corner of Trumbull and Pratt Streets with a substantial new 4-story building known for many years as the Standard Building. These first 4 floors have now stood for a century. In 1988, the building was greatly enlarged with the addition of 4 new floors. Built at that same time was a pedestrian bridge above Trumbull Street that connected the building to the Hartford Civic Center. The bridge was removed about 20 years ago. Let's return to the corner of Trumbull and Church Streets and the 1898 Walder Building. Back in 1920, its corner store was Nelson's Drugs, but in 1939 it became home to Kid Kaplan's Grill. A Jewish immigrant from Kyiv, Ukraine, Louis Kid Kaplan's family emigrated to the United States in 1906 when he was 5 and settled in Meriden, Connecticut. He started boxing at age 15 and turned professional in 1919, earning the nickname the Meriden Buzzsaw. The highlight of his career came when he knocked out Danny Kramer in 9 rounds at Madison Square Garden to become the new featherweight champion. He soon outgrew the featherweight division and boxed as a lightweight until his retirement in 1933. Kaplan, who proudly wore a Jewish star on his boxing trunks and became a role model for many young people, was inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in 1986 and the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2003. Kaplan opened his grill at Church and Trumbull Streets in 1939. Like other popular restaurants of the time, it featured an orchestra and dancing, as well as a bar and cocktail lounge. On September 30th, 1948, guests arriving for the restaurant's weekly old movie night were treated to a film of one of Kaplan's bouts. The footage was recorded at the East Hartford Velodrome, also known as Hurley Stadium, on September 24, 1930, when Kaplan defeated Battling Battolino in a 10-round points decision. The Hartford Courant newspaper noted that Battolino was also expected to appear at the restaurant for the film showing. There's a video on YouTube of the fight, which I'll link in the description below. Just over a month after this film was shown at Kid Kaplan's restaurant, the Courant reported that he had ended his connection with the grill by selling his share to his partner, Meyer Reichlin. In 1952, Reichlin changed the name of the restaurant to the Townhouse. Another business that occupied space in the Walder Building was D&R Blutstein, incorporated in 1930, which sold linings, trimmings, notions, buttons, and other supplies for tailors and dressmakers. The store was started by Samuel Liebman and his wife Rose in 1907 on Morgan Street. They moved to 278 Trumbull Street 3 years later. Liebman died in 1918, and his widow married David Blutstein, who continued the business with his stepson, Herman Liebman. When the Walder Building was demolished as part of Hartford's redevelopment in 1968, the store moved to a new location on Main Street, where it continued until Herman Liebman had to move out again because the structure, which was located near the Gold Building, was demolished in 1983. Let's return one more time to an image of the Walder Building back in 1920. This photograph shows the buildings adjacent to it along the south side of Church Street. There was a 4-story building at 97 to 103 Church Street, just to the east, and then a lot that was being used at the time for parking. Just beyond that, adjacent to Christ Church Cathedral's parish house, which was built in 1916 to 17, was a structure called the Pepion Building, which stood at 61 to 65 Church Street. It was erected around 1898 by John Pepion, a painter and decorator. The photo on the left shows the Pepion Building when there was still an older 3-story wood frame structure just west of it that was torn down by 1920. Tragedy struck at the Pepion Building on January 20th, 1902. John Pepion's brother Frank and another man, Xavier Garneau, who both worked for him as painters, were at work on the rear of the building, which had a series of verandas on each floor. To reach the cornice, the two men were balancing on each end of a long wooden plank that extended beyond the ends of the third-floor veranda. Because Pepion was heavier than Garneau, his end of the plank began to fall down. Garneau was able to jump onto the veranda, but Frank Pepion fell to his death. His body was immediately taken inside the Pepion Building, to the rooms of Duffy and O'Brien, undertakers. By 1918, the Pepion Building was owned by Isidore Wise of Wise, Smith & Company Department Store. In that year, Wise had his favored architect, Isaac A. Allen, Jr., supervise the moving of the Pepion Building back 7 feet and 3 inches to accommodate the city's widening of Church Street. The photograph on the right shows the building about a half-century later. After the move, it was lined up more evenly with Christ Church's parish house. By the time of the second photo, another building had been erected just west of the Pepion Building. It was built for S. Max & Company Furriers. In the early 20th century, Church Street was the location of a number of fur companies, such as Connecticut Furriers. S. Max & Company was established in about 1908 by Max Sklerinsky and his wife Rose, who were Jewish immigrants from Russia. In 1979, their daughter, Doris Schwartz Hurwitz, published a memoir about her childhood in Hartford titled Max and His Rose. Their store had been located on the opposite side of Church Street for 14 years, before they purchased the property just west of the Pepion Building from G.F. Heiblein Incorporated in 1928. The following year, the new 3-story S. Max & Company building, designed by the architectural firm of Berenson and Moses, opened at 69 Church Street. The building, which had a refrigerated fur storage vault in the basement, remained the home of S. Max & Company until Max Sklerinski passed away in 1954. Then there was a big liquidation sale before the business finally closed. This photo was taken in the late 1970s when construction was underway on the north side of Church Street, where the Stilts Building, parking garage, and Hartford Stage Company are located today. There was still an old advertisement for S. Max painted on the side of the company's former building. The neighboring Pepion Building appears to have been much altered or completely replaced by this time. Both of these structures would soon be demolished, and the place where they once stood is now the rear driveway and loading docks for the office tower at 280 Trumbull Street, which was built in 1984. The area around the southeast corner of Trumbull and Church Streets gives little hint today of the old streetscape that would have been familiar to Hartford residents of old and the many business owners who thrived here, including Edward Mahl, Louis Kid Kaplan, David Blutstein and Herman Liebman, John Pepion, Max and Rose Sklerinski, and many others. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment below and a super thanks, and hit the like, join, and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching.